What's up? Hello again. My name is Rick, if you're meeting me for the first time. Today, I would like to talk about remote education and what you can do to elevate your remote teaching experience to make class more engaging for yourself and more engaging for your students, okay? So, there's a couple of things that I want to cover. Number one is going to be hardware. We're going to talk about software just a little bit throughout this presentation, but I think the hardware is very important to talk about because one thing that I see in remote education a lot, and if this is your preferred setup or what you have to work with, that is totally understandable. But what I see a lot of are teachers who set up a laptop and they use the laptop's camera and the laptop's microphone, and that's their setup and that's what they have to work with. And again, if that's all you have to work with, that is totally understandable. However, if we're looking to elevate that remote teaching experience, there are some things hardware-wise that we can add to the to the experience that will definitely lift that class up a little bit. We're also going to talk about accessibility, and we're going to talk about the awesomeness of working in your own creative space. So let's get started and let's take a look at some hardware first. So we're going to start with cameras. All right. So one thing that I see a lot of instructors do is they use the camera on their laptop, and that's basically where it ends. They put the laptop down in front of them. Okay. Now, if that's what you're working with and that's all that you have, that's fine. But there are also ways that you could set up your laptop so you could get a better experience out of that as well. Okay. So we'll talk about that in just a minute. If you are able to get your hands on a webcam, a separate external webcam that you can use with your laptop, you are going to elevate your experience right away. Okay, so everybody is on the internet all the time. Okay, everybody is watching video all the time, right? So you know for yourself that if you're watching a video and you're learning from that video, if that video is sharp, if it sounds good, if it looks good, you know that you're going to get more out of it and that you're going to pay closer attention to it rather than if it's blurry or if the sound sounds like it's coming out of a tin can or something like that, right? So first thing you want to do is get yourself a camera. Now, you don't have to throw down $1,000 for a Nikon or a Canon or anything like that that you can hook up, though that is an option if you do want to do that. There are ways to do that. But I want to talk about something that's a little bit simpler that's going to help elevate your remote class. Okay, so I like to use the Logitech 930E webcam. Okay, for a couple of reasons. Number one, it's usually around $100, right? It looks really nice. It's got a nice wide angle lens on it, and it just streams really well in full HD. Now, you're not going to get 4K out of that, but you don't really need 4K for this to look good either. I think if you're streaming in 1080p and you're using that little webcam, you're just going to get a much better look than anything you're going to get out of a laptop. Okay, in my experience, no matter how new a laptop is, those cameras that are on board are never as good as getting an external camera, okay? So that way you'll get yourself a nice, sharp look on your course, and I think that's the first thing that you want to think about. The second thing that we want to talk about is the audio, okay? So again, one thing that I get complimented on all the time in meetings is how great my audio sounds, that it always sounds like I'm in a studio, okay? Now, you don't necessarily need to get a full setup like what I have here, okay? But if you do get an external microphone, okay, there's a lot of companies that make some great microphones that will make you sound like you're in a studio. It'll give you a studio quality, okay? And it'll pick up the sound really well. And again, if you're teaching remotely, I don't care what you're teaching remotely, but if you're teaching remotely, it is so important that you sound good, because that's one of the number one things that matters when you're teaching remotely is how you sound. Okay, so there's a couple of different routes you can go for that. Now, number one, you could always think about looking for microphones that are listed as podcast microphones, okay? Rode makes a great podcast microphone. Shure makes a great podcast microphone, okay? I have a Shure SM58 here being used. Actually, if I'm being honest, it's almost being used incorrectly for what it's for. This is the type of microphone that someone would bring on stage with them at a show to play music and sing into, okay? But it works perfectly in my setup, and I tested a lot of microphones to figure this out, right? So I run this through a board and I get this sound. But again, there's no reason for you to go that elaborate with the whole thing, all right? But when you do get a microphone, there's another thing that I want you to think about in terms of hardware. And I think this is something that I don't know, people just overlook at first. Get yourself something to put the microphone on that is going to enable you to give the best teaching performance that you can, okay? So you could get a little stand, right? And your microphone sits there and you sit in a computer chair. And if that's how you teach the best, then do it that way by all means, right? But if you're like me, I need to be on my feet. I need to be able to move around a little bit when I teach, okay? It's just who I am. It's just in my nature to teach that way. Okay, so I have this this microphone arm right here that attaches to my desk over here. And I can raise it up. I can lower it. I can make it longer, shorter, do whatever I have to do with it to get it where I want it. And usually I'll keep it right here. I'll keep it right here in the center. And this works perfectly for me and perfect for my setup. The next thing that I want to talk about, and again, this is something that I feel like a lot of people, they don't think of right off the top of their head, but get yourself a good pair of headphones or a good pair of earbuds when you're teaching remotely, okay? So you might be able to go wireless with your earbuds or wireless with your headphones, which will give you more ability to move around. I have these big headphones right here, these big JVC headphones with a really long cable on them. This typically works perfectly for me. Now, this is important for a couple of reasons. Number one, you want to ensure that you don't get a feedback loop, okay? And you'll notice that if you have a student who has their microphone on, but they're not wearing headphones or earbuds, you'll get that sort of looping sound that seems to get louder and louder and worse, the longer it goes. The way you prevent that is by wearing headphones or earbuds, okay? The other reason that this is important, and I think that this is really important, is because it keeps you present in the class. You're 100% present. If a student needs to get your attention, or a student says something, or they have maybe they have a quieter voice or something like that, you'll be able to hear that instantly. Okay, so I think that it's really important to get yourself a good pair of headphones or earbuds. Finally, the last thing that I want to talk about has more to do with software. I think it's important to make sure that you learn how to use some kind of video editing and some sort of sound editing software, because you might have a great idea and you might want to film yourself doing a class or a course. And I think getting good at some of that software, and there's tons of it out there nowadays for you to play with. A lot of it has been simplified. So if you feel that Adobe Premiere is a little bit too daunting to jump right into, then you could use Camtasia and learn Camtasia, okay? And there are plenty of courses on LinkedIn to help you with that. But I think that that's important because also, like I said, if you end up with a setup where you've got a nice microphone, you've got nice headphones, you've got a great camera, you might want to pre-film a course, and you can cut all sorts of visuals in there and sound effects in there, and you can make that absolutely awesome. So again, that is something that I would definitely recommend. Next, I want to talk about how you use all of this stuff to really engage with your students. Now, I've already talked a little bit about that when it comes to the headphones, right? When you have the headphones on, you are 100% present in that class, right? You're ending the feedback loops, okay? It's just a professional thing to do, okay? And again, there's plenty of choices for that, right? But let's talk about camera angles just a little bit, okay? So one thing that I mentioned earlier is a lot of instructors will set up their laptop, they will put it down, they'll sit down, and they will look into the laptop, right? I always kind of, to me, it kind of feels like somebody's looking down a well.
Good morning, class.
So the good thing that you can do with an external camera is you have the opportunity to move it around in order to get it in the perfect position for you. I always like to think of eye level, or maybe just a hair above eye level, usually feels perfect for me if I'm, going to be on my feet and more animated when I teach. I think that is that feels right, and it doesn't feel like somebody is looking down. And here's the other thing that you might not consider at first is you look more professional when your camera is set up in a good spot. So when I talked earlier about laptop cameras, and if that's all you have to work with, take your laptop, put it on top of something then. Try to get that camera, if that's what you have to work with, that's fine. Try to get that camera up a little bit so it doesn't look like you're looking, down in a hole at your class. Okay, like you're looking down a gopher hole and your students are all down here looking up at you, right? Okay, so again, if you're up and you're at eye level, it's really no different than when you're talking to someone in person and they're standing right in front of you, right? That's what you want. You want that person. That's what you want. You want that face-to-face contact. You want it to feel real. You want it to feel good. You want it to feel like you're standing there in front of people. Next, I want you to think about the space around you that you are working with. Okay, this is again something that I've noticed in remote teaching, where sometimes people will I've had colleagues who will teach classes right behind them. All they have is just big blank white wall, or if they've got the laptop down pointing upward, you can see where the ceiling meets the wall, and you get a lot of strange shadows and things like that, right? So think about your space. What is the ideal space that you want to be in? Okay, this is your opportunity to have something creative to work with. Okay, and that's again one of the great things about teaching remotely is you get to teach in your ideal creative space, and I think that helps a person be the best that they can be, right? So this backdrop here that I have is all something that we built ourselves. A lot of times I'll get in a meeting and people say to me, "Oh, I love your background." And what they mean is they think it's like a filter or like a green screened background. But no, this is the real deal. It's all real, right? So you have an opportunity to do that. And again, I think somebody looking and seeing a space that looks really nice around you is a really big deal. Okay, that way you don't look like you're teaching, against a hospital wall somewhere. You know what I mean? So play with it, have fun with it, make yourself a great creative space to work in and to teach in. It will make you feel better. It will make you engage better. And again, it's another one of those things that looks professional. So if someone's trying to learn from you, they're going to pay closer attention to what you're saying, even without it's not even like it's going to go through their head like, wow, look how good their background is. It doesn't even trigger that way. But if a video looks bad or a video looks kind of poorly put together, that does register in someone's mind. Okay, so you want to think about that. Another thing that I think is important that I don't want to skip is your lighting. Okay, so a lot of people will not even think about lighting. I've had colleagues who've taught before, and again, no offense to them or anything, but sometimes they'll just turn on the kitchen light and you get these sort of shadows that are going on, and it just doesn't feel natural, right? Play with the lighting. Get yourself a light ring. Light rings are really affordable, and they can absolutely transform the way a video looks, like to a level that if you've never worked with one before, you might not even believe how much nicer it can make your video look. Okay, so again, it's inexpensive and it elevates the look and feel of your teaching experience, and that is important. Earlier, I talked about if you feel comfortable teaching on your feet, if that is something that you're used to in a classroom, then rather than feeling confined to a space where you're sitting down at a desk teaching, back your camera up a little bit, use that wide angle a little bit, right? Get on your feet, as I said earlier, and move around a little bit, okay? This will help you to also feel like you're more in a classroom environment, if that's what you're looking for, okay? And it will feel that way, to the people who watch as well, okay? So utilize that space, okay? Film yourself a little bit. See, how far can I go? How much space do I have to work with here? How good does my microphone sound as I'm walking past it, or I'm going this way, or whatever, right? Utilize your space. You don't have to remain confined to your desk ever, okay? If you want to get on your feet, get on your feet. One of the last things that I want to talk about is using virtual tools to promote high-level student engagement. Okay, so there's a lot of things that you can do to actually, like free up your ability to communicate with students. Okay, and this also falls into the category of accessibility. All right, one thing that you're going to find from remote teaching is a lot of students who are typically quiet in a classroom might speak up more online, but in different ways. Okay, you do have students who are afraid to turn their cameras on. And this is something that I also, that on a side note, I think that also requires a little bit of empathy sometimes. I understand that, instructors want to know that their students are there and see their students, but I would also argue that a lot of students want to be there more than I think we give them credit for sometimes. But I also find that sometimes the students that are afraid to show their face are the same students that sit in the back during class, right? And these are the students that might put their questions in the chat, okay? So you've got all these tools to play with, right? I talked earlier about hardware and software. You could record a perfect lesson. Let's talk about doing a live remote course with a pre-recorded lesson. How can you do that? How can you use that, right? I've filmed myself giving lessons that are just perfect. And I took them and turned them into videos that I could use for my courses, okay? Now, to be fair, I've also stood in front of a class and taught a lesson, and when it was over, just been like, what was I doing? Like, what was I thinking, right? So when you nail it perfectly and it looks good and it sounds good, that might be something that you want to use again, okay? So let's say we're teaching remotely and we have a pre-recorded lesson that we want to use in our class. Great. You can use all the tools. You have your hardware, your software, you used Camtasia or Adobe Premiere to cut and create this great video, and you play it for your class, right? What you can do is this is not an invitation to just play a lesson and then go back to sleep, right? What this is an opportunity to play the perfect lesson for your students, and you can also remain active in the chat while the video is playing. And if a student has a question, you can pause the video, turn your camera on, come onto the screen, and you can clarify things if you need to. A lot of times, if your lesson's really perfect, maybe that won't even have to happen, right? But the other thing too is that you can make that video available to your students all the time. I know even in my time as a student, I wish that there were lessons that I had seen live in a classroom that I could go back and revisit. I feel like that would have made me even a stronger student to have those. Well, we have that opportunity to use those tools in order to elevate our remote classes, okay? And again, this is great for accessibility. This is making the best available to everybody all the time, okay? I had a student once who was late for class every day because she was in a wheelchair and she had to wait for help, and she had to find an elevator, and they put the elevator all the way in the back of the building, and it was just this entire thing. I had other students who had a death in their family and they didn't want to get up and go anywhere, but it was a lot easier for them to turn on a camera and turn on a course while they were at home so that they didn't miss anything, regardless of what was going on. So I think that when it comes to accessibility, this has taken things to a whole new level, okay? In regards to that, if you make a perfect video lesson for your students, you also have the opportunity to put open captions on that, okay? There are so many things that you can apply to make your courses more accessible to everybody and make yourself more available to everybody without feeling like you're overextending yourself all the time, because you're working in your perfect environment, your perfect space. You have access all the time in your space. And I think that's really important. I think that brings out the best in everybody. So now what I would like to do is give a little mini lesson using the most basic setup there is. And then I want to do the same lesson, but I want to take all the tips that I've talked about today and I want to apply them to the very same lesson. And we'll take a look at them side by side and we'll see what the difference is. Let's take a look.
Good morning, class. So today we are going to talk about Hamlet, and we are going to focus on a question that scholars have been focused on for centuries. Was Hamlet driven mad by his father's death, followed by his uncle's marriage to his mother, or was he simply pretending? Let's talk about this.
Good morning, class. Today we are going to talk about Hamlet, and we are going to focus on a question that scholars have been discussing for centuries. Was Hamlet actually driven mad by his father's death, followed by his uncle's marriage to his mother, or was he just faking? So this is something that we're going to talk about. All right. As you could see, hopefully, the second video is definitely far more elevated than the first video. That second lesson is clearer, it's crisper, it feels a little bit more natural, a little bit more real, like you're standing in the room with people. Okay, so I think applying those tips to your course will definitely make it better. That said, I would like you to please check out my website, educationwithrick.com. I want you to keep checking out my LinkedIn. In about a week or so, I look to be releasing some supplementary material to go along with this video. I want to make a Articulate Rise course using a little bit of Articulate storyline and some video editing skills, and put all those together and make something that will go right along with this video. So please make sure you check that out. And if you have any questions, comments, any experiences that you want to share, please leave a comment below, or always feel free to reach out to me and message me. My messages are always open to everybody. So again, thank you so much for watching my video. My name is Rick, and until next time.